It's day 7 of 14 days thinking about Katherine of Aragon, and today we're thinking about those early years up until the birth of Mary the First. So we're going to think about 1509 to roughly 1516 today. Catherine's political influence was at its peak in those early years. Her and Henry really cooperated in terms of different policies. Right from the very start of her marriage, her dad, Ferdinand, made her in charge of kind of negotiating between himself and with Henry, and she used to write to Ferdinand in cipher. She was also responsible for getting rid of the Spanish ambassador from court that she didn't really like. It's generally thought that in those early years, Catherine and her husband, the king, were very much in love and were happy together. There certainly seemed to be a real attempt to kind of put their initials together on everything possible. Even the salt shakers had combined initials of the two, and famously he would have her carry her name when he was competing in tournaments. It seemed to be a relatively happy, exciting court. There were always feasts on, there was always entertainment. While Henry was away in France in those early years, Catherine was writing to Wolsey to inquire about her husband's health and to check everything was okay, which could certainly be viewed as loving, but the skeptic in me also thinks, well, what would happen to her if a husband died again? So she's obviously going to be concerned. 1517, she's been described by some authors as having reached a dignified middle age. I mean, she was just over 30, so I take issue with that. However, by this point, she's fluent in English. She's running a large household. She's really presiding over the court. She's a real beacon of patronage, particularly in education. She's encouraging the universities. She's having input with poor scholars. And encouraging lectureships. So a real influence on education there, and that's something that we see later with her daughter Mary. Now, from June to October of 1513, while Henry's off playing war in France, she's left as the governor of the realm, and this comes with certain authorities and responsibilities. She could raise troops, she could make appointments, she had her own council to help run things. At one point she writes to Wolsey saying she's horribly busy creating banners. Now this can be taken two ways. It could be seen as maybe a bit of a sarcastic dig at her more feminine domestic role of this is all I'm doing, making banners. However, her mum Isabella did make banners for her own military campaign, so it may have been a genuine comment. While her husband the king is away, James IV invades England, so James IV, the King of Scotland, and this is where we have the Battle of Flodden. She's very often depicted in films as being in armour and riding forth, possibly pregnant, leading an army. This didn't happen. Thomas Howard and his army went and sorted it out. She was back away with a reserve army. One source suggests she gave them a really rousing speech, but there isn't really any evidence for that, unfortunately. So there's sort of the dramatised versions we see of that in films, while very exciting, are embellished quite heavily, I think. Finally, I can't talk about these early years without mentioning her real tragic troubles with pregnancy. So I'm going to talk about miscarriage and child loss now. So if this is something that you might find triggering, feel free to scroll on, and I'll see you tomorrow. Now I am going to read these dates because I want to make sure that this is something I do accurately. So in 1510, she miscarries a little girl. Now her stomach continued to be really swollen afterwards, so for a time they did suspect or believe that there was a twin, and that was celebrated, but no twin ever appeared. And then in 1511, she did give birth to a little boy who they named Henry. So obviously there was huge excitement there, but he very sadly died at around 6 weeks old. 1513, there may have been a possible live birth sometime around Flodden. In 1514, she gave birth to a boy, but unfortunately this was a stillbirth. In 1516, she gave birth to the Princess Mary, who, as we know, lived until adulthood. Then in 1518, again, she gave birth to a little girl, but this was a stillbirth. So really, really devastating for Catherine and Henry too, obviously. We do need to bear in mind that aristocratic women did still have a high rate of loss when they had children. It wasn't uncommon, but obviously that doesn't make it any less sad. We also need to bear in mind that a lot of these dates and reports come from kind of ambassador reports here, there and everywhere, so they may not be entirely accurate. So that's where we're going to leave Catherine today, and tomorrow we're going to think more about her pregnancy and confinement and birth of Princess Mary and what that kind of birth atmosphere process may have been like for her. So I'll see you tomorrow.